making my mile-high apple pie. I use 13 apples of 6 different varieties, 2 Cortland Apples, 3 Granny Smith, 2 Ambrosia, 2 Gala, 2 Fuji, and 2 Honey Crisp. And so, first thing you have to do with apple pie is make sure you peel the apples. So, all the way around, make sure you get all of the apple peel off. And then we're going to core it and cut it. My Honey Crisp apples are generally too big because they're giant apples, so I have to cut those by hand. But the rest of them are small enough that you can use a regular apple corer. And I have a special apple corer that slices them into 16 pieces because we like small chunks of apple. And I used to cut them by hand after I cored them and sliced. Now I have this one that does it into much smaller pieces. So just line up the whole of the core to the whole the core in the middle of the apple. And sometimes it takes a little bit of strength. There we go. And then make sure that when you look at your apple, all the pieces of the core are gone, because you don't want to cook the core. It tastes bitter, very bitter. So there are our apples, and to that we are going to add 3/4 of a cup of sugar. I'm sorry, 1.5 cups of sugar. Excuse me. 1/2 teaspoon of salt. 3/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. 3/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. 1/4 teaspoon of cloves. And 2 tablespoons of flour. We are going to mix that all together. And I like to use my hands because it gives me a feel for making sure that everything gets a little bit of seasoning on it. And now, over the top, we're going to drizzle 2 tablespoons of lemon juice so that it does not oxidize any further. And then we're going to set this aside for about 30 minutes so that the seasonings, the nutmeg and the cinnamon and the cloves, can get inside those apples so that when we cook them, you get all the flavor in them. Today we're going to finish making apple pie. We made pie crust on an earlier video, so this is our regular double crust. We're going to start out with sprinkling flour on our table. And then we're going to roll this out. One of the first things I do is put a little pressure on it to break it up because it is ice cold. It's been in the refrigerator. And then spend a lot of time rolling out and moving around. And make sure you keep flour on your surface, otherwise the pie crust will stick to it, and then you have to start over. And that's not fun. So I have a 9-inch deep dish pie plate, which means I need to get about a 12-inch circle. Alright, then what we're going to do is lift the pie crust, put it right in the pan. Make sure you use your hands to make sure the crust is all the way to the edges. And then we're going to crimp a little border, which doesn't matter nearly as much because we're going to put a top on this one because it's apple pie. But if you're just making a baked pie crust to fill with something else, I'm going to make sure the edges look pretty. Now we're going to fill with the apples and then cut the edge of the crust and roll a new crust for the top. Okay, so our apples have been sitting in that spices and the lemon juice for about 30 minutes. So they are ready to go into our pie. And basically, what you're going to do is stuff them in. I move around to make sure that they are tightly fit. There are not really any holes. Because once the pie bakes, the apples are going to shrink down in size. And so you want to make sure that your pie is still full and that you don't slice into it and have huge pockets of just air. And this is the one my husband always makes fun of me because my apple pie is always huge. Very tall. And in my estimation, it is always better to have apples left over than to not have a big enough pie. That's my personal opinion. All right. Now if you look, there's a lot of juice left in the bottom. That is juice that has come off of the apples. That's one of the reasons we let it sit, so that juice has a chance to get away so that your pie is not too soggy. So the next thing we're going to do, now that our pie is filled with apples, we take butter, because butter is one of the greatest inventions. And take little pieces. I cut little slices and then tear in half and put throughout the pie. This is an old trick my mother does. It's one of the reasons I always loved her apple pie. And yes, you will have some pieces fall down. Just pick them back up, set them in. Alright, so it's about 3 tablespoons of butter. We'll save that last tablespoon for something else. And now we're going to take the other half of our pie dough and we're going to roll it out. But first we're going to take off the gloves that are covered in cinnamon sugar. Once again, put more flour down. Now this one's going to have to be bigger because it's going to have to go over the apples. It doesn't just have to cover the bottom of the pie plate. All right. I think that's going to fit. Now is the fun part. You have to try to lift it off of the table. Put it right down. Now, if your pie crust is not big enough or it has a hole in it like this one did here, all I did was take and fold over. You see that? Fold it over so that you have that nice coverage all the way around. And if you need to move. When I do the crimping, if I find that there's holes where I can actually see the pie plate, I just pick up a little of the crust that's hanging off and slide it up there to make sure that nobody has ever said there is too much crust on this pie, especially when you make a butter crust. Okay, so now that it's crimped all the way around, we're going to take a knife and lightly go around on the outside to cut off that excess dough. And then part 2. So apples, as they heat, are going to have a whole lot of steam come up. If you don't cut vents in at intervals, your pie is going to explode. So you need to be able to let the steam out. All right. Now we're going to put it on a cookie tray, just like this, and slide it in the oven. We started at 500 degrees. Then as soon as I put it in the oven, I'm going to lower it to 425 degrees for the first 20 minutes. That gets a nice warm color on it. And then we're going to lower the temperature again to let everything cook all the way through. So our apple pie has now come out of the oven, and you can tell, see that steam coming up through those steam holes? Can't wait to slice into this and try a piece.